And we're going to go into our approach to quality. Let me go to the next one. All right, so this is a list of quality program elements. Framework might be a strong word at this point at the level we're describing it or discussing it today, but I'll maintain that even a list of valuable and important concepts are formative to a framework. So as we proceed today, we're going to go through each of these elements of our quality framework: culture of quality, measurement, applications, primitive metrics, project types, service performance indicators, and qualitative assessment. And you notice that really only the top one and the bottom one are speaking to qualitative. All the rest in the middle, again, I'm going to use the word quantitative. So measure, quantitative, these are going to be recurring themes. Now, the model that we're sharing today is an actual HP business service practice model. We use this quality model, and it's a little bit abbreviated here to accommodate our time frame, etc. But nonetheless, the model we're sharing with you is one that we use and our delivery organizations use regularly in our business. Thanks. So now we're going to start with culture of quality. Now, Philip Crosby is also a very well-known quality guru. Wasn't included on the slide in the Pantheon, but he is a member of the Pantheon. So if you were to go out and research, quality experts, quality gurus, you'd probably see all 5 of the names, the 4 we had before, plus Philip Crosby. Now, this is a bit of a dense slide. I really want to make a couple of points here. It's really Crosby was really focused on the culture of quality, as I say, and came up with this quality maturity model. And on the left, we see stage 1, uncertainty. And I'm going to focus on the left, management attitude. Quality is not seen as an important or integral part of the business, right? Stage 1, uncertainty, management attitude, so what, right? Get to stage 5, in the certainty stage, quality management is essential. It's fully integrated with the business. It's part of our practice. Now, you may have heard of Six Sigma. Any Six Sigma? Anyone familiar? You've heard? No, 1 or 2, right? And so it's actually heavily statistically oriented analytics approach to doing quality management, and originated in Motorola. And we do have some references to Six Sigma. We're not going to get into it in depth. It is very mathematically oriented, statistically oriented. But Motorola, as an example, is way over here on the right, back from the late 80s when they inaugurated their Six Sigma investment. And now they're recognized as a leader in manufacturing, industrial, and business quality. As we proceed again from left to right, we notice on the uncertainty stage, organizations don't really have an understanding of the impact or the cost of quality. And hence, when asked to report what the cost as a % of budget is, they don't know, hence the question mark. When examined by an outside agency, it's found to be about 20% of budget. The cost of quality is about 20%. When we get to the certainty stage, we see that organizations who are fully invested as a business practice in quality, they know that their cost of quality is about 2.5% of budget, and when assessed by an outside agency, lo and behold, it is concurred to be 2.5% of budget. And I think the bottom line is an interesting takeaway. Starting from the position of we don't know why we have problems to we know why we don't have problems. So again, building a culture of quality, this is the qualitative part of it, the touchy-feely part. We're going to talk about things that are more data-oriented as we go forward.
Okay, our next area that we're going to talk about is measurement. we measure everything in our lives. We measure our weight, we measure we balance our checks, we understand what's going on. We measure everything. Very important for everyone, including the sponsors, the project managers, and everyone around to understand measurements, because you have to know how you're doing. It's really a key to quality, as you see our slide says, right? So what is a measurement, right? It indicates the performance of processes in a quantitative manner, again, in a mathematical way. It manages stakeholder expectations, right? You're just not a project manager there working on a project. You have clients, you have project sponsors, you have the executive team, you have a whole range of stakeholders that you need to manage along the way. It improves your decision making in a business environment, right? It helps you make that shift where you need, because you're measuring your business as you go. It helps you improve those decisions that you need on a tactical and strategic level. You quantify the amount of work that's been delivered. I said I was going to do this amount of work in July. I either did X or I did Y. I either did less, little, or I did it right on time. And improved processes for the next job, right? You're gathering data. So here we are, we're running a project, building an application, and we might do that somewhere else. We're gathering data. We have measurements that we can compare for our next job that we do. So there's two areas, right? Prediction and control. Can anybody give me an example of prediction? You almost had something. All right, so here's the example. Here it is, right here. How is the project, how's it expected to perform, right? We're predicting something in the future. What's it going to look like? We think it's going to be this in July. We think it's going to be this in June, right? And control, right? Control, are we hitting our cost budgets that we predicted? Are we hitting everything that we predicted? These are very important concepts, not only for project managers, but for all the stakeholders, including the project sponsors. So here's some definitions around measurement, right? A measure, right? It's a basis for comparison. I've already mentioned, how do we do in one month versus the other? We have a primitive measure, right? It's a distinct property or characteristic and the method for quantifying it. And we'll get to those in a few minutes. A computed measure, again, quantitative, mathematical function of two or more basic measures. Very important. And of course, everyone here knows metrics that's been in the project world, right? So you look at your metrics all the time. A combination of multiple measures. Enable settings of measurable targets. We have targets that we try to hit. How is that looking? Do we have an executive dashboard that actually shows how we're performing? The next area is an application, right? It's a specific business area, standalone functionality to the user. It's a result of a single project that may be enhanced over time. And we'll get to some examples of these. Boundaries based on customer executive level view. Again, back to the executive sponsor. Boundaries independent of technical considerations. Okay? Now here's an IT industry definition of an application. It's a cohesive collection of automated procedures and data supporting a business objective. I think most of us in this room understand that very well. But pizza, right? Everybody understands it. You put it into a pizza model. The first definition is really a specific business area. We're making pizza, right? And we're going to have a lot of food references coming up here, you'll see in a few minutes. Because everybody understands food. Everybody doesn't understand everything else. Everybody understands food. All right? So a result of a single project that may be enhanced over time, right? One pie for one customer, pepperoni, mushrooms. Boundaries based on the customer's executive level view. Is it ready-made? Are there special orders? And of course, boundaries independent of technical considerations. A brick oven, like you get at one of those places, or does it go through a conveyor? Okay? Simple with the food? Okay? And of course, we always have a best practice here when we go through these, and obviously clear scope definitions is always a best practice. What are you building? What's it look like? That's important for everybody at all levels of being involved in a project. Okay, so now we're going to go through some of the primitive metrics as I promised. So they're basic measurements, right? Directly measurable and countable, and there's several here that I'm going to list. One is size. One is effort. How much work does it take to do? Staff, obviously, how many people does it take? What are the skill sets? The duration, how long is it going to take us? Defects, who hate those, right? This is a quality conversation. We don't like defects. It means rework, it means investment, it means cost. Try to minimize them, right? And of course, change. We always change things on projects. I don't care how tight it is. I don't care how well we gather requirements. There's always change on the project because what something looked like today in a room does not look the same as it does 6 months from now. And there's a whole range of reasons for change too. So here's the first measurement, size, right? A measure of how big the application or product is. The benefits of collecting and tracking size, right? There's a few. Basis for estimating effort, right? How big is it? How much work are we going to have to put into this? You know, we're going to have goals. We're all going to set goals. We all set goals in life. They could be small goals, big goals, or whatever, but we need to know how big it is, and it's used for monitoring the goals that we set on our projects. It's a basis for tracking project progress against those goals, right? We need to take a look at our goals, and we need to go ahead and measure ourselves against them. Used for historical comparison. Again, I mentioned earlier that we're doing a project, but we need to gather the information that we had so when we do something again, we can repeat it, or hopefully repeat it with less mistakes, be able to build quality in from the beginning. Because we've learned, right? That's very important. So size, here we are back to the food. So it's a measure of how big the application or product is, right? We all know what a quarter pounder is. Some of us know all too well what a quarter pounder is. Subway foot long. Tom was reminding me that there was actually somebody, I guess recently, somebody measured the foot long at Subway, and it turns out it's 11 inches, and now it's in court. I wish I would have thought of that, actually. And of course, the 6-piece spicy chicken nuggets. We all know what these things are. In the IT industry, right, size means something as well. It means something a little different. Function points, right? Do we know what a function point is, or we don't? So right here is a function point, right? Your account and your cart on Amazon. Those are two function points you see on the screen. They do something specifically, right? And if you know at Amazon, they have a whole range of different function points. So that's a measurable attribute, okay? Lines of code. If you are in application development, you know about lines of code. And of course, here's the best practice. Record estimates and actuals, right? So we were having some conversation before this around project sponsors, and this is really the best thing you got going if you're a project sponsor. I have my estimates. This is what it was estimated. This is the actual work that was done. Something very important that everyone gets their head around, because it's the only way you're going to measure your business.
So the next metric is effort, and you see our definition: number of labor hours expended to complete a project. So we're saying effort is labor, right? In a service environment, and let's differentiate service from a product, right? Product is a tangible thing that can be sold, used, handled, etc. Versus a service, which is accomplishing, tasks on behalf of somebody to make some other element of business or life easier, right? So in the service world, effort essentially equals labor. As we go further, what are some of the considerations? We want to consider size again. We just talked about size, complexity, right? So different flavors of these things. We want to look at staff experience, what tools are available, what processes, why? Because ultimately, effort equals labor equals cost, as it says in the first element of Y there. And re-emphasizing driving points home, again, estimating, it's used in estimating. We talked about estimating, that's part of our prediction. An estimate on a project is a prediction. We're estimating, we're predicting how much labor or effort we need. We're predicting, as we'll see in the next slide or soon, when we think we're going to get done. So again, estimates. All these things are used. Estimates, Scott just mentioned actuals and estimates. Why we want to compare. We said we're going to do X. Did we do X? More or less, etc. So again, we're just reiterating. So effort is an important metric, fits right into the theme. So we also Scott mentioned computed metrics earlier, combinations, mathematical combinations of things. Effort is used to tell us about productivity. Well, what's productivity? It's really bang for the buck, right? How much we can get done with a given unit of labor or effort, right? So it's a relationship between size and effort, linking our metrics together. And again, another theme that's recurring as well, it's used for comparing with history as well. Well, why do we want to look backwards? Because our record of performance it's kind of like our mutual funds, right? You always get the disclaimer, past performance is no guarantee of future results. On the other hand, what else do we have to look at, right? Is past performance. So same thing applies from a quality perspective, from a project management perspective. We look at our historical records to anticipate and estimate and predict forward, right? Okay, staff. Staff is the number of people assigned to an application or a project during a reporting period. So a couple of new concepts here. Well, why? It's closely related to effort and duration. Well, duration's coming up. We're going to see that in a minute. It's also used, again, for estimating and for tracking, right? We're linking again. Tracking, actuals, estimating, prediction, right? Look forward, look at performance backwards, compare the two, adjust as we go forward. So some common staff metrics in service management and IT service management in particular, we often look at full-time equivalents, we look at peak staff. So here's a project, Scott and Tom. We are, well, I'll fudge this a little bit. We're each 50% dedicated to this. There's two of us. So if we were 50% dedicated, which we're not, we're 100%, but let's just say for a minute as an example, we're each 50% dedicated. So full-time equivalents, there's one. Peak staff, though, there's two, right? So that's what we mean by this. And these are common metrics used in tracking and forecasting and comparison of performance going forward. Now, the question was asked to us earlier again. We'll try to reemphasize this, is well, what's kind of in it for me? Implicit in every one of these metrics, and hopefully we're pointing this out, and you're welcome to stop us if you don't understand, are questions that you can ask about your business, about your, to your team members, to your stakeholders, about your business and about the performance of your business or your work activities, however you want to regard it. Go to the next one. So now, here's a picture of a staff, right? And we talked about, well, what do we consider? Skill set and availability, right? Anybody see anything? Skill set and availability. Any indicators on this picture that leap out? Let's talk about skill set. I see 4 young women smiling with a basketball. And there's a trophy there. So any indication of skill set? They're good because they have a trophy. Now, I have 20-year-old twins, and they're kind of out of the kids' sports thing, but boy, they got a lot of participation trophies. So we don't know, right? We don't know. But it does leap out at you that there's a trophy. So there's at least some indicator of skill set here, right? How about availability? Anything leap out at us about availability? Only 4, right, only 4. Well, I don't know, maybe they're in central Kansas and They play 4-person bass. I don't know, right? But chances are, right, we'd ask the question, do they have the right number of people, right? Now, I'm going to just say maybe the 5th is Kevin Durant. I see it's the Thunder, and he's taking the picture. So, I don't know. But anyway, yeah, so you can derive a little bit about that. Ultimately, our best practice, review team skills, align with roles and responsibilities. The question here is, do we have the right seats identified, and are the right people in the right seats, right? Roles, responsibilities, right seats, right people in the right seats, right? That's the question we're driving at. Can be tracked. This is a metric. Can be tracked, measured. Okay, duration. So we just talked about some workforce metrics, effort, staff. Here's one, duration. Now we're talking about timeline. Now I used the word at the top, calendar days, start, end. We're talking timeline. All of the keywords, start date, end date, commit date, delivery date. And then a computed metric, time to market. Again, that's a combination, but time to market even speaks of timeline. So commit date is, I owe Scott some work in preparing slides, and I committed to have it to him by, 2 Fridays ago, and did he get it on time, right? So now we're talking duration. And it's important, I'm jumping ahead here. Our fast food example again. So some familiar references. Domino's used to have a 30-minute or it's free, but evidently the drivers were causing accidents. They dropped this program. Pizza Hut used to have a 5-minute, you make your order, 5 minutes you get it back. So we're talking duration, right? It's a measurable thing. And certainly Domino's was tracking how many were delivered under 30 minutes, how many they had to give away free, right? I mean, it's a metric and it's duration driven. So our best practice, be aware duration and effort and the other workforce staff are related, but they're different. And this is an important project management differentiation and a quality differentiation. It's easy to overload, I'll say, project plans or project schedules with duration and kind of assume that everything about the labor that's involved, the staff that's required, the right seats, the right people in the seats, we got that covered when we talk about a timeline. No, not really, right? All are important, all are integrated, they're different. On a simple project, maybe a small task team, maybe all we use is duration oriented schedules and plans. As projects become more complex, it's important to differentiate those metrics. They all mean different things, right? Next metric is defect, flaw in the product or service so that it fails to perform its required function. I'm going to reflect back to the definitions we introduced. So flaw speaks to that attribute aspect of the definition. We remember attribute, a characteristic, and then attainment of that attribute, right? So we're talking about both of those here, the attribute and attainment. We've got an attribute, but it wasn't attained, right? Keys to quality. So we want to count defects. We want to know how many we have. And in the IT industry, there's a lot of, they'll call it defect density, how many defects per some other measure. And that's tracked and retained. On a kind of more generic level, certainly defects can be identified in any environment. We talked about the delivery of Domino's. A defect would be I didn't make it in 30 minutes, right? We can go. So why? I've probably covered the why in the middle. In IT, we tend to do a lot of categorization. We look at pre-release and post-release defects. What does that mean? Pre-release before we give the product to the client, post-release after we give it to the client and the client is using it. We're going to link this when we get to the cost of quality later. We'll link back to this. We'll see the same reference. Categories, how bad was it? Where did it come from? Do we know why? What's the root cause? I mentioned root cause earlier with Ishikawa. Best practice has to be scheduled. Defect analysis is a critical part of the project, right? There will always be defects. And we're going to have a slide, I mentioned Six Sigma earlier, we're going to have a slide later on Six Sigma. Again, no deep dive. But it's all about minimizing defects through the other processes and the concepts that we've been discussing. Okay, so as you might imagine, there's a rich library of defect stories available in the media. We have one from IT, and we'll see another one from fast food in a minute. The one we have here from IT, so back in the first Gulf War, Donald Rumsfeld was Secretary of Defense. He asked a retired general, Shoemaker, to return to active duty as the Army Chief of Staff, highest rank in the Army. Well, General Shoemaker was on the Army's retirement system. He was no longer in active duty, no longer, right? So the IT system where he was administrated was that one. And it turns out that there were two significant, I'll say, flaws. Now, maybe they were design features. That's always the discussion and the debate, right? One was they couldn't pay him, because you can't pay a retired person. Second one was, he went back to active duty, there was only one way off the retirement system. So they sent a condolence letter to his wife. So you know, it illustrates, you know, really how significant defects are. Another fast food example, we've got this recurring theme, right? We've got one we thought that would be really familiar and hopefully amusing, right? Fast food throughout, obviously. So another lawsuit over submarine sandwiches. Somebody found in 2008 an 11-inch serrated knife baked into the bun of the sub, and was suing whoever it was. So we won't name names.
Okay, the next area we're going to talk about is change, right? It's measures volatility of an application and of project requirements, right? We're talking change. It's frequent. It's moving, right? We have a lot of change. As I said before, in projects, we have change. We think we won't have it, but we will. So what is a change, right? It's a request to add something. You can delete it or modify a requirement that's been agreed to. Like I said, at the beginning of the project, we had a set of requirements we agreed to, and now we're going to move off of those, and that's a change. It really includes any controlled project item. So here we are, back to the fast food examples again. Many of you remember this. I believe this is from the 70s, 80-ish time frame. Dating myself here. Burger King, right? Hold the pickles, hold the lettuce, special orders, don't upset us. Remember that? Now, all we ask is that you let us serve it your way. Many of you will experience projects where requirements were locked down. We agreed to them, and then we wanted to change it. People wanted it their way. And there's a formal process for that we'll talk about. Facebook. How many people here have a Facebook account? Right? I do. How many people have looked at their Facebook account one day and the next day it looks different without your permission, right? So that's been in the news as well. It's been, and they get away with it. I don't know how that happens, but they got away with it. It's pretty good. So the next area is project types, right? The type of work performed within the scope of a project. So there's new development, right? You have a new project, you're going to start something new, you're going to gather requirements, you're going to scope it out, and you're going to start a new project overall. And then there's the enhancement, right? You already have a system that you're building, a product you're building, and you want to change it, right? It's another project type. And then, of course, maintenance, right? You build it, it works, but you want to correct things that just aren't working properly. And again, back to the fast food example, hamburgers, which are kind of on the grill, and of course French fries, which are in the deep fryer, right? Service performance indicators. I think this is something very important for us all to take a look at. You know, it's a market-driven, standard share and concise set of customer visible quantitative metrics. Remember at the beginning of the presentation, we kind of emphasized quantitative metrics, right? So there's several. I won't go through all of these, but there's a couple. Tom already talked about the production quality, the number of defects during a specific period of time, right? Tom already addressed that. Application serviceability, right? The percentage of change requests satisfied within the committed due date. We talked about change early on. Are we hitting our dates once a change request goes through? Are we hitting what we said we would? Service performance dashboards, right? Everybody sees dashboards on something, and we'll get to an example of that in a minute. But HP, this is actually an example of an HP dashboard in Service Manager, and we see these when we do our projects. It gives us an executive view of what it looks like. How's our project performing, right? How are we hitting our targets? Do our estimates to our actuals okay, right? We can measure just by looking at metrics, and someone who is not knee-deep in the weeds all the time can take a look at this and say, you know what, this looks like it's performing on time. Lets people make a decision. The other thing is, well, it's not performing on time. Things are red. Things are behind schedule. Things are costing too much. Use this as a tool to say, wait a minute, this is an executive level tool. What's going on? What are we doing to fix this? What kind of support do you need to fix this? Another important thing.
I have a question.
Yes.
Go back a few slides on the project types. So under maintenance, those aren't break and fix when you say correct faults. Those are really things that are working as designed. You just decided that you didn't like the functionality once you got it.
Right. Okay.
So I think Tom,
Yes.
So you made a comment. I sort of struck on a couple slides back about you're always going to have defects. I guess I want to challenge that a little bit. We're in a quality discussion here, and I say to myself, if in fact I've got a good testing strategy, I've got a good quality process, why would I automatically assume I'm going to have defects?
Yeah, it's a good question, and you know, I'm gonna first say it's a practical reality in that the goal is to strive to minimize defects, and we're going to see, as I mentioned, when we get to the Six Sigma slide later, we're going to see what Six Sigma means relative to defects. It's so very few, it's almost in practical terms no defects. But in most industries, defects they happen. And what's a defect? A defect is a failure to meet a requirement. Now, that can happen for a lot of reasons, right? In IT, there can be disagreement over what a requirement really was, right? Just understanding. If Scott's the customer and I'm the service provider, I may have thought I understood. Scott, as the client, may have meant something that I missed. Arguably, that ends up being a defect. In a product environment, I don't know. Look at it. Look at our fast food. Look at McDonald's. What if they forgot the onions? You know, something like that. Or you know, they baked. We saw some. They baked a knife into a sub. I'd be pretty confident that whatever that subchain was has a pretty well-defined process about how to roll the dough. Right? I mean, it's probably well-defined. Somewhere, though, there's a breakdown, right? And it resulted in a defect. So it's a practical reality. You know, I come from the Detroit area, and of course, that's, you know, Motor City. It's you know, high volume, complex things. You know, it's hard to get zero defects. It's just a difficult thing. Auto industry example. J.D. Powers publishes first-time quality reports, and they rank every brand of automobile regularly, monthly, annually, about first-time quality, you know, performance. And what does that mean? It's the number of defects delivered, identified by customers, in other words, indicated by returns back for warranty service in the first year. For however many, you know, some baseline, 1 million cars or whatever their baseline is. So pretty much every industry, it's hard to get zero. Right now, when we get to Six Sigma, we'll see we're pretty darn close. When you're at a Six Sigma level, and again, we're not doing a deep dive in Six Sigma, the goal is minimizing. Practical reality is, can you ever eliminate? Probably not, right? So it's right, we'll see that in a few slides further, right?
But it was a very good question.
Yeah, excellent question.
So here's used to be my favorite dashboard to look at when I was watching football or something. Domino's, they still use this, by the way, but I changed my diet. It's the only reason I don't use it anymore. And you order a pizza at Domino's, and they will, you could track it live on where it is in the process, right? So essentially, I'm the executive watching football, and I'm seeing where my pizza is in. Of course, they eliminated the 30-minute thing because of people getting hurt. But at least I could tell where they're at. And they also, ironically, have a good quality check in here. That's it. They do have a quality check. They have someone checking their pizza, which I think is great. They have good wings, too, if you're interested. So the best practice is really to summarize things and aggregate that data to give someone a view so they can take a look at the overall picture of your project and what is going on. Okay? Qualitative assessment. Now, this is something that is really ingrained in the HP culture, right? The voice of the client, right? Because you heard Tom say earlier that what's very important is that we understand what our customer wants so we can meet that customer's objectives. They have requirements, we need to meet them, right? So what we do is we gather feedback and we act on that feedback, we evaluate that feedback, and then it rolls up into a service excellence dashboard like you just saw a little while ago. And we do this by conducting surveys, conducting interviews with our clients to understand kind of some of the touchy-feely stuff. How are we performing? What can we do better? This is very much ingrained in the culture. We have Mark Brigman in the back, who's the account executive. He knows heavily about this process. He gets knee-deep into it, but everyone gets involved in this at some level. Now, in the fast food industry, Papa John's founder, this is what he talks about quality. He said a lot of people want to own quality, but it takes time and costs money to own quality. And Tom's going to get into the cost of quality here in a second. But it was rated #1, limited service restaurant by American Customer Satisfaction Index with highest category score in survey history. He invested in quality. He knew it cost time, he knew it cost money, but it paid off.